What's going on, y'all? It's Big Facts again, coming at you with another video. So recently, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and President of Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, have recently made calls for a ceasefire in Libya. Now, Vladimir Putin has been in Istanbul, Turkey, where he was part of the inauguration of a new gas pipeline that was linking through Turkey. With that said, this just goes to show that Russia now is the sole superpower in the Middle East. When it comes to influence in the Middle East, Russia is now that sole superpower. Now, you guys are probably saying, like, what do you mean Russia's not in this Middle East? And I know that Russia is not in the Middle East. But when you look at that region and who is a great stabilizer of that region, it is now Russia. Vladimir Putin is, this guy is a brilliant geopolitical mastermind. He was former KGB, so he knows how to operate when it comes to foreign affairs and foreign policy. What he is doing in the Middle East by making sure that there are going to be strongman leaders in each and every one of those countries and siding with them, those nations in the Middle East hence are going to side with Russia, because Russia is actually that beacon of stability that region needs. You look at it in a country like Syria, all right? Bashar al-Assad is friends with Vladimir Putin because Vladimir Putin backs al-Assad, because al-Assad is a strongman in the Syrian government who Russia and people in that area feel like brings stability to Syria by keeping the elected official in his position. That's how Russia sees it. That's how most of those people and supporters of those regimes see it in that region. When you look at Libya, Russia does not support any intervention into Libya. They rather keep the GNA in power, keep the UN-backed government in power there to bring stability into that region. You look at countries like Iraq, Iran. Russia supports the Iranian government staying intact. He supports stability and the wiping out of ISIS from places like Iraq. Russia supports these nations in which the United States wants to see the topple of them. The United States wanted to see the topple of Muammar Gaddafi. Russia didn't. Now, you may be asking, like, what is Russia's endgame? And I'll tell you what Russia's endgame in this. If you pull up a map and you see all these regions coming from the Middle East down into North Africa, it's a brilliant chess play. If Vladimir Putin is able to gain the favor of the leaders of those countries, he now has NATO encircled. There is no way he's now in the backyard, face to face in the sea with NATO. There is no way NATO forces now can pressure Russia the way they once did. You see, U.S. presidents going as far back as even George Bush, they are behind the 8 ball when it comes to doing geopolitics with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is leaps and bounds ahead of them. He's a better strategist. And this is why Vladimir Putin is finding it scary. He's finding a difficult time to find a successor for himself in Russia, because I don't think there's a person in Russia today that has the geopolitical skills, the strategy skills of Vladimir Putin. Only time can tell. That's why Hillary Clinton was the only person that could have probably somewhat competed with him. That's why the Russians made every concession possible to ensure that Hillary Clinton does not become the president of the United States, because she was the sole threat to Russia. Vladimir Putin, seen how she took out a strong man in Muammar Gaddafi, seen how she toppled and threw Iraq into even further chaos. So he knew that she was a strategist when she was Secretary of State for President Barack Obama. He knew that she was a strategist in that administration. But now that she's out the picture and he has to deal with Donald Trump, Putin already knows he has Trump as his pawn. Now he's just basically gaining favor of all the strong regimes in that region. Even look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is now doing business. They are now doing business with the Russians. They have divorced their relationship with the United States slowly but surely. They're actually not in a full divorce, but let's just call it a separation. And they're looking to the Russians because the Russians ensure that the monarchy in Saudi Arabia will stay intact. And that's what they want. All these regions in that area, you guys have to understand, they're not all with the whole democracy thing that the United States is trying to push. A lot of them actually need a strongman leader in those countries. Tayyip Erdogan is friends with Vladimir Putin as much as the United States will want Erdogan's regime out of Turkey. Vladimir Putin doesn't, because Vladimir Putin looks at Erdogan as that strong leader to keep things in control in the Mediterranean Sea. So you guys have to be cognizant as to what's going on, that there is now going to be a geopolitical shift on who are going to be the superpowers for this next century, for these next 20 years, 50 years, how it's coming. There's going to be another superpower in play, if not even two. One being Russia, if they can economically diversify themselves and regain some sort of economic foothold. Two being China, if they can now at least elevate a majority of their population from out of poverty and into being an economic class or a strong middle class like the United States, where they don't have to rely on the United States consumer. They can now rely on their consumer base. The minute those two things from each of those countries, Russia and China, get solved, they're on equal footing with the United States. So I want to hear what y'all have to say. Like, comment, subscribe down below. I'm out.